Good evening. I'm Nima Rajan, and this is Forum Daily for Friday, July 22nd. We begin tonight with Canada's role in supporting efforts to help get Ukrainian grain to famine-threatened parts of the world. This comes after the signing of deals that would allow that to happen. Russia and Ukraine signed separate agreements today with Turkey and the United Nations, which will clear the way for the export of millions of tons of grain. But Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Canada and other G7 members will be watching closely to make sure the agreements do not put Ukraine at risk of being invaded further by Russia. Mr. Trudeau cautions that Russia has shown nothing but bad faith, and his faith in President Vladimir Putin is nil. All right, well, meanwhile, the Prime Minister says Gymnastics Canada should be concerned about reassuring parents across the country that the sport is safe. Speaking in Prince Edward Island this morning, Mr. Trudeau responded to questions about the federal government freezing funding to the organization. The move comes after more than 500 current and former gymnasts called on Sport Canada to conduct an investigation into claims of sexual abuse in their sport. Hockey Canada's funding was also recently frozen in the wake of the national organization's handling of an alleged sexual assault and out-of-court settlement. All of this comes as Hockey Canada says members of its 2003 Men's World Junior Hockey Championship team are being investigated for a group sexual assault. The National Sports Organization says it learned of the alleged incident on Thursday evening. This was after being contacted by a reporter seeking comment on the alleged assault. Hockey Canada says it has immediately contacted Halifax Regional Police about the allegations because Halifax was the co-host city of the 2003 World Junior Hockey Championship. Halifax police are opening an investigation, and the National Hockey Organization says it also contacted Sport Canada and informed it of the allegations. Hockey Canada has lost government funding and corporate sponsorship. This was following an alleged sexual assault by the 2018 men's junior hockey team. In the Northwest Territories, the government plans to begin rolling out COVID-19 vaccines for children 6 months to 4 years old next week. Parents and guardians can book appointments for youngsters starting Monday, now that Health Canada has authorized the use of Moderna's tot-sized vaccine. Yukon and Saskatchewan are offering appointments for the Spikevax vaccine this week, while Quebec will do so next week, and Ontario will open vaccine bookings for children starting next Thursday. Toronto's Pearson International Airport has topped a list of the world's worst airports for delays this summer. It was the only Canadian airport to crack the top 10 of a CNN list, which was compiled with data from flight tracking site FlightAware. Pearson came in at number 1 with nearly 53% of flights this summer delayed. Germany's Frankfurt Airport is in second place with 45% of summer flights delayed. And Paris's Charles de Gaulle Airport is in third with 43%. The Toronto Airport has also ranked fourth on a list of the world's worst airports for cancellations, with 6.5% of all flights canceled. Meanwhile, a clash over whether U.S. Customs officers can be armed on Canadian soil has kept Nexus enrollment centers closed in Canada for more than 3 months. The standoff has led to a massive backlog of hundreds of thousands of applications for the program, which allows pre-approved travelers to cross the border more quickly. It comes at a time when delays are wreaking havoc on summer travel plans. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says the two countries remain in discussions about when the 13 centers will reopen. Back in Toronto, a large procession of up to 1,000 Hells Angels members arrived in the East End on Thursday. They were greeted by a significant police presence, but ultimately dispersed without incident after a few hours. The procession started in Newmarket around 11 a.m. and ultimately landed in Toronto. This was for a ride held in honor of longtime Hells Angels member Donnie Peterson, who died at 74 of natural causes. Toronto police say no arrests were made related to the event, and as many as 1,000 Hells Angels members are expected to gather in Whitby this weekend for the club's national motorcycle run. Taking a look at retail sales now, StatsCan says they rose to $62.2 billion in May. The 2.2% increase was led higher by sales at new car dealers and gas stations. Boosted by higher prices for food and drink, core retail sales went up 0.6% for the month. The agency's preliminary estimate for June sales points to a gain of 0.3%, but that number could change. After the break, we have Forum Daily's energy update with GasWizard.ca's Dan McTeague. So stay tuned. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back. Up now, we have Forum Daily's energy update with GasWizard.ca's Dan McTeague. He is a senior petroleum analyst, and GasWizard.ca is a gas price prediction website. He joins us now with his outlook.
Well, thank you very much for that, Nima. And of course, what a week we've seen here on energy prices in diesel across Canada. They've actually dropped to levels that I think are quite surprising. Surprising in the sense that demand seems to be the reason why the American picture for inventory seem to have had a very positive impact. In other words, Americans since July the 4th have actually been foregoing driving. Demand is down probably about 2 or 3%, and supply continues to roar ahead, with refineries doing something that always puts them in trouble in the long run. That's running at pretty high rates of operation, 95, 96%. And remember, of course, in a good part of the United States, they've lost anywhere from 3 to 10 refineries from running at full tilt since 2019. So hats off to refiners meeting demand, but I don't think they can continue doing it forever. And we're not always going to get a break when it comes to what's happening in the U.S. Gulf Coast. It's been very quiet. I know this might be disappointing news for climate alarmists, but there are no hurricanes or any activity of any type in the U.S. Gulf of Mexico. That could continue to maintain prices. But I think we've bottomed out. And I say that because oil is now at points where it hasn't been since before the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I think there's a lot of skittishness, a lot of nervousness among traders, but there's only so many excuses you can trot out, including higher interest rates, including yet another wave of lockdowns in China, before you realize that sooner or later, those who are producing products to catch up with world demand for everything are going to have to come up for air, and they're going to have to buy a lot more oil. That means, of course, with sanctions being imposed on Russia, with natural gas prices going through the roof in Europe, we're looking at a scenario where possibly beginning in August, prices are going to begin to recover. Not so much to the point where we saw gasoline prices in Toronto hit 215.9, 233.9 in Vancouver, or about 230, 229 in Montreal. But it's certainly a scenario that sees us moving back to potentially almost $2 a litre. Of course, provinces like Ontario have dropped some degree of tax, so that has certainly helped. But the federal government continues its one-sided policy of increasing prices through carbon taxes, whether that's the existing carbon tax, in which your rebates don't amount to what you were actually having to put out, and their consequential impact on the cost of everything, including food. You're not rebated for that. There's second carbon tax, the Clean Fuel Standard. That will start to bite in about a year from now, but in the meantime, it means that refineries are going to have to ramp up production of ethanol. And that, of course, means displacing production of food that would otherwise go for consumable reasons. For that reason, we can continue to see inflation again rearing its ugly head. Interesting last week that the Bank of Canada governor finally had to admit what we've been saying here, what I've been saying with you as well, Nima, and that's that we are no longer the petrodollar. The Canadian dollar is not responding to the high price of oil because we've killed pipelines, natural gas and oil in this country and thought nothing of it. But it's actually leading to about a 30% drop in our purchase power. And that means, of course, the Bank of Canada finally had to admit they're shocked by it, surprised by it, can't explain it. I can, but they won't. But that's likely to mean higher interest rates, which means higher borrowing costs, not just for you and I, but for the government of Canada. That 1% increase last week has meant the federal government is going to have to find $13 billion to make up its shortfall. So anybody who thinks that playing around with energy prices and fooling around with green energy has no consequence, well, I think you're starting to find serious disappointment because we all can't make ends meet. Bottom line, this time next week, I think we're looking at an average increase of about 3 cents a liter across the country. Saturday will be the best day to buy gasoline. So if you're shopping around, get out on the 23rd of July, Saturday, buy your fuel, because going forward, prices are likely to go up an average of 3 cents a liter across Canada. And it really doesn't matter where you are, coast to coast. Well, Nima, that's a wrap for this week. Have a great weekend, and we'll be back at it this time next week.
Always a lot to consider, Dan. Thanks for that. Again, that was Dan McTeague with GasWizard.ca. He's also the president of Canadians for Affordable Energy. All right, stay tuned. When we return, we take a look into the latest developments in the world of crypto. Forum Daily's cryptocurrency and digital asset update with Catherine Murray is up next. Catherine is the host of The Buck Stops Here, where she unpacks the latest big moves in the markets and the world of finance. And after that, we'll take a look at the news-making headlines around the world. So stay tuned to Forum Daily. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Up now, we have Forum Daily's cryptocurrency and digital asset update. We're joined by Catherine Murray, host of The Buck Stops Here. All yours, Catherine.
Thanks, Nima. Hello, everyone, and welcome to your crypto and digital asset update. I am Catherine Murray. Well, the top 10 cryptocurrencies are, in fact, trading higher to the tune of anywhere from 3 to 8%. The total market cap now back to $1 trillion. We've actually seen some nice stabilization within the cryptocurrencies over the past couple of trading days, alongside some stability in the North American equity markets. Bitcoin, in fact, is up by about 11% week over week. Number of headlines to mention for sure. We did see Tesla report their most recent quarterly results this week. They interestingly announced that they have sold 75% of their $1.5 billion Bitcoin position. It seems as though this is somewhat of a departure from what we've heard from the company only 1 quarter ago, when the company said that they were committed to liquid alternatives to cash. So we did see a bit of a pullback in Bitcoin to the tune of about 2% on this news the other morning, but it still is up by 18% over the past 7 trading days. Also, interestingly, in terms of who's getting involved in this space, a very influential billionaire hedge fund manager, Alan Brevin of Brevin Howard out of Europe, is a $23 billion macro fund. Apparently, he has been quite a bit of a major force and player within the crypto venture space in Europe as well as the US. That's according to the FT. He's made about 43 investments and actually started to first invest over 5 years ago and continues to invest despite all of the volatility. Interestingly as well, auction house Christie's has launched a VC fund for art technology startups focused on NFTs. It will be an in-house investment firm called Christie's Ventures, and the aim apparently of the new company is to really advance Christie's activities in the presentation, education, and sales of fine art and luxury goods, and really focused as well on art-related financial products. This seems to be the interest to use technology that enables the consumption of art. In other words, if you use blockchain, perhaps the sales process is more secure and seamless, and perhaps even lower costs. We'll see. Away from that, in other news as well, and also importantly on the blockchain application front, which is what we're talking about as it relates to Christie's auction house, the UK is going to be exploring blockchain-based government bonds, according to the Chancellor. And they're really working to try to understand what this would look like and how it would be applied. Perhaps one of the reasons to do this is because issuing bonds via blockchain is looked at as a way to speed up the process and also reduce the costs. Interestingly, this isn't the first time we've seen this. We've seen it through Thailand as well as the Philippines. But the UK would in fact be the first among the G20, or even more so the G7, we should mention. So perhaps some significance there. Very important here as well in terms of the regulations and news we've heard this week. The SEC has actually charged a former Coinbase employee and 2 other individuals of insider trading. This would actually be the first time that the SEC has identified coins as securities. Of course, they oversee securities. So interesting move there. We'll see what comes of it. The agency, the SEC that is, said that the three individuals coordinated to allegedly purchase a number of coins and then sold the coins when it was announced that these coins would be listed on the exchange. Coinbase is traded on the NASDAQ. The ticker there is COIN. And they did disagree with the SEC findings. So we'll continue to watch that story pretty closely. Also, of course, we've heard over the past couple of weeks, Three Arrows Capital has claimed bankruptcy. The founders have discussed the bankruptcy in a Bloomberg interview, but apparently are keeping a low profile as they go through this liquidation process. And lastly, as you know, we've seen a lot of volatility in cryptocurrencies. As I said at the top of the conversation today, it seems that we're finding a little bit of stability. Well, Citi Research also thinks that maybe there's going to be a little bit of stability, saying that the crypto contagion fears have likely reached a peak. Nima, I'll leave it there. Back to you.
Thanks for that, Catherine. For more coverage of the markets and the world of finance, be sure to follow Catherine Murray on The Buck Stops Here. It airs on Sundays at 9 a.m. Eastern right here on the News Forum Network. All right, stay with us. We've got news from around the world up next. Ukraine and Russia sign a grain export deal. More details emerge about the January 6th attack in the U.S. Capitol. And Sri Lanka's president orders the army to clear away protesters. More on these stories and more news from around the world up next. Russian and Ukrainian officials have signed deals to end a standoff over grain exports brought on by the war in Ukraine. Ukraine is one of the world's key bread baskets, but a Russian blockade of its ports has threatened food security around the world. The two countries signed separate agreements on Friday with Turkey and the United Nations, which means Ukraine could export 22 million tons of grain and other agricultural products, which were stuck in Black Sea ports by the war. The Secretary General of the UN and Turkey's president joined the signing ceremony in Istanbul. The UN chief called the deal a beacon of hope on the Black Sea that will help hungry people around the world. Meanwhile, the Russian central bank has slashed its key interest rate. This comes only a month after dropping it to where it was before sending troops into Ukraine. The bank says inflation expectations have decreased as it lowered its key rate by 1.5 percentage points to 8%. Decline in business activity was slower than expected last month. The bank had hiked the rate as high as 20%. This comes in the wake of the February 24th invasion and the resulting Western sanctions that restrict dealings with Russian banks, individuals, and companies. All right, turning to the U.S., where the panel investigating the attack on the Capitol has heard that former President Donald Trump refused to call off the mob. This was despite pleas from aides, allies, and even his own family. After months of work and weeks of hearings, the investigating committee held its second primetime hearing last night. In one gripping moment, the panel showed Mr. Trump refusing to deliver a speech declaring the election was over. This despite his daughter, Ivanka, encouraging him to read the script. In Sri Lanka, the newly elected president sent army troops to clear out the main protest camp of demonstrators outraged by the country's economic meltdown. Security forces were seen beating at least 2 journalists during the overnight raid in the capital, and 2 lawyers were also reportedly assaulted. The United Nations has denounced the heavy-handed tactics. Meanwhile, President Ranil Wickremesinghe has chosen a prime minister with close ties to the political establishment. Tensions are also high in West Africa, where Mali's ruling junta says that jihadi rebels attacked the Kati military base, which is on the outskirts of the capital city of Bamako. It is the first time Kati, Mali's largest military base, has been targeted by extremist rebels in their more than 10-year insurgency in the country. The attack occurred at about 5 a.m. Friday morning. This was when vehicles loaded with explosives detonated at the camp. The Malian military statement said that the armed forces vigorously repelled the attack and 2 rebels were killed. The military said that the situation is under control and a sweep is underway to find the perpetrators and their accomplices. Moving to North Korea now, which is warning the U.S. and South Korea that they could face unprecedented security challenges. This if they don't drop their hostile military pressure campaign against the North, including joint military drills. North Korea views any regular U.S.-South Korean military training as an invasion rehearsal. This even though the allies have said they have no intention of attacking the North. The latest warning came as Washington and Seoul prepare to expand their upcoming summertime training. Judges at the United Nations highest court have dismissed preliminary objections by Myanmar to a case involving its Rohingya ethnic minority. The case is alleging that the Southeast Asian nation is responsible for genocide against the Rohingya. The decision on Friday clears the way for the highly charged case brought by Gambia to go ahead at the International Court of Justice. This is a process that will likely take years, but it sets the stage for court hearings airing evidence of atrocities against the Rohingya. Human rights groups and a UN probe say they amount to breaches of the 1948 Genocide Convention. A garden that celebrates the friendship between Canada and the United States is about to mark its 90th anniversary. The International Peace Garden, with some 80,000 flowers, sits on the border south of Boissevain, Manitoba. The anniversary celebrations include a weekend of historical exhibits and cultural performances on July 30th and 31st, along with a 1930s themed dinner. All right, I'm Nima Rajan, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. Remember, for more news on demand, you could always visit our website, thenewsforum.ca, and make sure to follow our social media handles on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You could also watch all of our commentary, programming, and interviews on the News Forum YouTube channel. Thanks for joining us today on Forum Daily News, and we'll see you next time. Have a great weekend, and take care, Canada.